welcome to 2 cents short of a dollar, the show where we give our 2 cents and keep it 100. We're your host. That's Mo Tiz, and I'm Rue. A lot going on in the boxing world, but something I want to talk about is the man Tim Tszyu. I think Tim Tszyu is a boxer who was slept on, but very quietly he's making a name for himself, and he's demanding that respect from everyone. So he's coming off a first round stoppage of Carlos Ocampo, where I think it was funny because I think in the interview, Tim Tszyu said, I know this is not going to go like the Errol Spence fight. I know it's not going to be a 1 round fight. And it turns out to be a 1 round fight. So is Tim Tszyu the real deal?
I mean, he's shaping up to be honest. He's not waiting on Jermell Charlo. I know Jermell broke his hand. And at this point in time, he's not just trying to just sit back and wait for that undisputed matchup. I think he's just racking up wins, and I think most importantly, he's racking up experience. Especially with he stopped
Tony
Harrison, right? Stopped him in Australia, and then he had an impressive stoppage against Carlos Ocampo. I'm not big on Carlos Ocampo, right? I know he got stopped first round by Errol Spence, and he did go the distance with Fendora. But I don't really consider him, a tough adversary. So the fact that he did get him out of there really early is still a good thing, right? Because if Tim Tszyu would have went the distance with Carlos Ocampo, then people would have started raising their eyebrows like, oh, he might be, quick work for Jermell Charlo. So I think he's just racking up experience. I think he is the real deal. I think he's a threat. Now the question is, do you think he's more of a threat than Jermell Charlo's last affair or last opponent?
Brian Castano.
Yes.
So I think it's different styles, and that's kind of what I was thinking of. If Brian Castano was a threat, which he was, and I think going into the first fight, not a lot of people thought he was, and he ended up being a serious threat in both fights, because even before Charlo stopped him, it started to get closer and closer. I think first Charlo was kind of like blowing him away, but that second fight kept getting closer and closer and closer, and then Charlo stopped him. But so I think Tim Tszyu got a different style. I think he's strong. He clearly hits hard. He can put the pressure on, but I think he can do a little more things boxing wise than Castano does. So I do think Tim Tszyu is a real threat. I do think he's the real deal. And like you said, the experience has been vital, that he's, there's not going to be any ring rust by the time they fight. And I think, Charlo's going to have to respect his power some, because he's out there stopping guys.
Yeah.
So I like that he just gives a different look than Castano. But I even though I do lean Charlo, I do think it'll be a tough fight for Charlo. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park by any stretch. Tim Tszyu, he's making me a believer, because remember that last fight, I remember I almost let Errol trick me when Errol was like, oh, I bet money on Tony Harrison. I'm like, yeah, Tony Harrison gonna beat this guy. I'm like, whoa, wait, no, he's not. No,
but you actually had Tim Tszyu win. I actually had Tony Harrison, and you had Tim Tszyu winning going the distance, but he ended up just stopping Tony Harrison. And since we're on the topic too, because someone brought this up as to why Tim's like that home court advantage in Australia is like a huge thing for Tim Tszyu, because people are saying, and I've seen this kind of circle around a few different places online, but they said that it's pretty hard to rehydrate in Australia because of the foods and water they have, right? They pointed out to like when Devin Haney was doing the weight cut and like a skeleton, that image, I'll pull it here. And then of course there are rumors what Tony Harrison was struggling to rehydrate as well while he was out there. So people are saying like in Australia, it's like a huge handicap because of those elements. Do you buy that, or do you think it's just
I'm not type of things? I'm not sure if I can buy it, because when they say the foods and the water, is it like a shortage of it? Like, why can't you?
So what they were saying was, I think something is in the water. So there's a lot more salt in the water, I guess. So it's harder for you to kind of lose weight because of salt in the water, because it's going to be harder, like it's going to be more retained in the body essentially. So they're saying like that in and of itself makes it harder to cut weight, right? For me, it's like, okay, well, what about the Australians? Do they have
what about Tim Tszyu?
Genetic factor that allows them to filter water just like easier? Like what's going on? But that's like the rumor that was going on. So I just want to ask you if you bought it, right? I don't really buy it, but
I'm not buying that one. I'm selling that rumor. Get that out of here.
I'm just selling to the next one. But nevertheless, Tim Tszyu is becoming a threat for sure.
Yeah, and then I'm to kind of touch on that. One reason I don't buy it is because when Tony Harrison lost, he lost in a Tony Harrison
Type of
fashion
way.
where he faded. You know what I'm
Faded, got hit
saying?
with the same stuff, uppercut, same
Yeah,
way. Yep.
yeah. It's not like something looked out of the ordinary. So
I
no,
agree.
I can't buy that one. I think people just have to give Tim Tszyu his credit. I think he's the real deal. And I think it's a weird thing, right? Because the last name, of course, from like Costa Tszyu, but you don't really see the relationship. I think Costa Tszyu doesn't even like show up to his fights. You know what I'm saying? So I think if they had like this father son on TV thing, I think people are like, oh, that's so cool. Look, and I think more people will kind of buy into the hype. But
Right.
I think surely he's going to make people buy in if he continues to do what he's doing right now. And depending on where Charlo's at, if there's another fight in between and then Tim Tszyu, looks impressive again, you know what I mean? Because right now, I mean, where would you have to rank him in 150 in the 154-pound division? Right now he's got to be what, maybe the second guy right now, just based on recent activity.
I
Fundora coming off
don't.
of a Fundora
I
got
know
knocked
Eric.
out.
I know Eric Lubison lost to Fundora. Fundora lost, but I don't. Just because you lost, don't mean that for me you automatically just drop from the
But I
chart.
mean, like a power ranking system. I'm not saying like perhaps Lubin could beat him, right? Perhaps, but I'm saying
Yeah,
like
and
in
I think
terms of like a
Fundora could potentially beat Tim Tszyu as
yeah,
well.
but in terms of like a power ranking system, right? So it's kind of like, what have you done for me lately?
Lately,
I would think he seems like the second guy there now.
oh, if you're talking about like in terms of consistency, like record wise, then yeah, he's second,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
because
yeah,
he's on a streak, he's undefeated,
yeah.
right?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, off that, just strictly off that, then yeah, he's clearly the second person, and he's clearly running up for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he's next up to face Jermell Charlo for the belts. So
Right now, in such a big year of boxing, do you think we need that fight this year, or what do we need? Does Jermell possibly need a tune-up before he fights, just to test out that hand, or what's your thoughts on that?
well, that's a good question. I don't know the full extent of his injuries. I don't think boxing needs that fight this year, but it will be icing on the cake if we do get the fight this year. And I think Jermell can kind of go straight into that fight, if I'm being honest. And I think because to delay it even further and take another fight, I mean, you might as well just get in there and do what you say you was gonna do. So
Yeah, and then I like, I'm getting interested in this Tim Tszyu. So I do want to see him fight Charlo, but I wouldn't be mad at squeezing another fight in there. Another, I guess I would say Fundora, but Fundora is really dangerous, right? But I guess people thought Harrison was dangerous, but another like really respectable opponent in there. If like Charlo's injury holds him out for longer,
right.
I'll keep checking on Tim Tszyu. I'm actually very, very intrigued, and he also has like this verbal beef going on with Errol Spence. I feel like too. I feel like he's like always like throwing shots at Errol Spence, and I don't know why I get that from some of the 54 pounders. I don't know if because they see him as a guy who can really come to 54, so it may be like a future opponent. But I know Zoo and Spence have like some weird stuff going on. There's like some with Castano because Castano beat Spence in the amateurs. You know what I'm saying? It's like all these guys. I don't know. Like Spence's name always just comes up. People just love talking about Errol Spence.
They like talking about, quote unquote, big fish, right? Like they know he's the cash cow. So, and like you said, strong possibility he do move up to 154 and just make the fight happen